He was the kind of kid that he was ready to get up in the morning, and he would hit the floor running. I can remember some mornings when in the summertime he'd just get up and go straight outside and jump on his bike or jump on his scooter or something. You know, some people have to have time to wake up, but he didn't. He was ready to get up and get going. And he was one of these kids that he just always wanted to encourage other. I had several parents tell me, you know, my son wasn't that good at baseball, but Jackson was right there to tell him, you know, that he's doing good and, you know, keep your head up. And he was that kind of kid. Yeah, very encouraging to others. Bobby was so excited to have a little brother. I remember when I brought him home, I put him in a little crib and Bobby pulled up his little chair and started reading him a little book to him. He was just so excited to have a little brother. So they just, you know, they grew up just having fun and loving each other.
I was just really ecstatic about it. And I remember when he was born, I was wanting to like hold him and stuff, but I couldn't because I was too little at the time, and it kind of made me mad, but it was all right, I guess.
I was in the hospital room the day Jackson was born. My mom and we saw the birth, and it was amazing. And I'm even more grateful now that I was in the room for the day that he was born.
Jackson always wanted to be doing something. When he woke up in the mornings, he was ready to go. He was ready to meet people and do stuff and play. And of course, Bobby liked to play too. And they would get out in the yard, and I had a basketball goal, and they would shoot basketballs, you know, especially when all four of the kids were there, Hayden and Kerrigan, and they all four stayed with me quite a bit, and they loved that. Jackson loved having them all around, everybody around, you know, so that was fun for him.
You know, when you have your first baby, it's all just really quiet around the house and everything, but, you know, it wasn't whenever Jackson was born, so I think he learned to sleep through a lot of noise. That's why he slept so good, because we had a lot going on at the house with the 4-year-old. Bobby and his cousins, Hayden and Kerrigan, they loved holding him.
Just from the beginning, he was always, like from sun up to sundown, always on. Like the light switch was always on. Running around doing really whatever he was able, whatever his mom would let him do, you know, he was doing, or not let him do, he was still doing. Yeah. But I remember staying over at Bobby and Jackson's one night and being so amazed, because I'm not really a morning person. I've never been. But Jackson would wake up and just be like bouncing off the walls just anytime. So I would try and sleep in, but just hearing him yelling and running around and doing all these things, it was hard to sleep in, staying over at their house.
Yeah. I just remember him being so energetic and so loved sports. Something else is in the backyard. Our grandparents have a big backyard. And so we made like a baseball field out of their backyard and had bases and would play 2-on-2 because there's 4 of us.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of memories. Or climbing trees.
Yeah. We're just running around doing cousin stuff, you know. Because like video games and TV, like we weren't ever
it wasn't like really
super big into. We'd always like be playing outside.
Christmas is always a big deal in the family because we would go to my mother-in-law's, go over to Patsy's. My family would go, Renee and her family would come. Everybody gathered around the tree from, you know, the little bitties on up, and that was a big deal. And seeing Jackson as on a Christmas was a lot of fun, because I always thought of him as sort of a Tasmanian devil, and he was full of activity and always in motion. He was a perpetual motion machine. I don't know if Jackson ever slowed down or came to a full stop, even when he was sleeping. He was always in motion.
He was the kind of kid, he liked being outside, so he always found something to do outside. Whether it was, I can remember one time I was looking for him and he was just around the house with a hammer, just hammering pecans and breaking them up and everything. Always got on top of the house, even though he was told not to. Yeah, he loved to climb up on top of the house. I'd be in the house and I'd hear something. And I was like, okay, that doesn't sound like a squirrel. Sure enough, he'd be up on top of the house.
When we were old enough to be left home alone, we'd always like sneak up onto the roof, bring up some lawn chairs and some like sodas, and like have our airsoft guns, and we just sit up there waiting for a bird to land on a fence or something and shooting whatever's coming around, and just sit up there and talk with each other. So that was always a good memory.
He was a funny guy. Little boy, he didn't try to be funny. And when he would say funny things, he didn't really laugh. But everybody else did, because he was witty. And even at his young age.
I want to take this moment to say, I give a shout out to my peeps.
Always on the move. We would be anywhere we were. I felt like within 30 minutes we were all looking for him. Because he took off and he had already made friends and was hanging out with other people, and at baseball fields he always had a snow cone ring on his mouth because he loved snow cones and he loved sugar. And about sugar, every time, like Graham always fixed sweet tea for meals, but Jackson, we put the sugar bowl beside him because he always added about 5 to 6 more spoonfuls into his sugar.
He wore, this is his shoe, and it's a size 10. I can actually wear this shoe now. And the funny story about this is that his teacher, one of the stories she told me is that anytime that she'd line the kids up to go to the cafeteria or something, and they would be walking to the cafeteria or music or whatever, she could always hear Jackson slapping his feet on the floor and tell him, Jackson, pick your feet up. And he's like, I can't help it, they're so big. But as big as his feet were, we just always felt like, my family we always talk about, we think he would have just been, over 6 foot tall, just a big kid.
One time, my husband was trimming trees in the front yard, and Bobby was there and he was helping, and of course Jackson wanted to help too. He put on a pair of Papa's gloves, and he was and this was after he got old enough and he could help, so he was out there and he loved it. He loved doing stuff like that. He'd get in the storeroom and get in some nails. Bill would have a bucket of nails there, and he'd get a nail and hammer, and he'd go hammer it wherever he could find. In fact, there's one hammered in the tree, and I have a wind chime hanging on it now.
A very distinct memory, you'll remember this, is we went into the alley, the 4 of us grandkids, and there was just a random abandoned backyard, and the fence was wide open with a huge trampoline.
I don't think it was abandoned.
You think somebody lived there?
Yes.
We trespassed. And
that was the whole deal.
Oh!
We weren't supposed to be back there.
No. There was a huge trampoline, and Jackson's like, let's just go. Like, let's go jump on the trampoline. For like a solid 30 minutes, we just were in these random people's backyard jumping on the trampoline.
He was really always an outdoor person. He'd always be out there making like whatever concoctions in the mud with sticks and worms and whatever. And he'd always be finding stuff in the alleys. He was like dumpster diving all the time, which is kind of funny. He'd always find some of the coolest stuff too.
I only worked about 3 days a week, so that I did get off quite a bit during the week, and I always loved being off during the week and could take them to school. We were close enough we could ride our bikes to school. He always wanted to walk home by himself, and I was like, you're really not old enough for that. But there was one, not a main street, but kind of a busier street that was between us and the school. So it got to the point where I was like, okay, you can walk to the corner and I'll meet you there and then we'll cross the street. Well, one day I saw him walking down the sidewalk and I'm like, what does he have in his hand? He had an ironing board he had gotten out of a dumpster. He loved the dumpster dive. But he would bring junk home all the time. Like, it didn't have any legs on it. It was just the board, but he was just holding it under his
He was in the garage one day and found a can of blue spray paint. And he sprayed it on the outside of the house. Sprayed it on the brick. It wasn't a very big spot. And in fact, we were just looking the other day and it's already disappeared. But he also sprayed it on the floor of the garage. And my husband's truck had always been parked there, so I'd forgotten it was there. And I just sold my husband's truck just not too long ago. And so every time I walk in the garage now, that blue spot of paint is on the floor. Of course, it makes me think of when he did that.
Jackson was crazy. He was wild. So I remember one time went to Rio Doce actually for a baseball tournament, and we went hiking. And Jackson's type of kid, like he'd run and fall down, but he was chasing people around with sticks, and like he could be carrying a big old log. And we're just like, Jackson, like where'd you get that? Or we go to the cabin and there's a hot tub, and we're like, Jackson, I bet you can't get into there for 5 minutes with the roof on. And he comes up and throws up in the hot tub, and so that was closed. Or he would throw boulders off the ledge into the pond and just get in trouble. But he's like
a stranger.
He like threw a ping pong like paddle at someone, like hit on, and we're just like, Jackson, you can't do that.
You know, I think one of, if not my first, true encounter with Jackson Roberts was at the Southwest Little League baseball field where we spent thousands of hours. And I'm coaching a game and I have somebody come up yelling at me that some kid's on top of the batting cage. It took me a minute to kind of process what they were saying, and I look over my shoulder and sure enough, in the beautiful West Texas sunset overlooking the lake, there's Jackson running up and back forth on top of this batting cage that's 12, 15 feet off the ground. So we go and get him down, and his comment was, I can do this, it's my daddy's baseball field. His dad mowed the grass and did an amazing job for us, but in Jackson's mind, that was his playground. And that's kind of when I learned that he was going to be a handful. We did the dugout. He was like a spider. He was hanging from the top of the fence and just doing everything that a 10-year-old should and shouldn't do. So
I remember one time, he was riding by the gutter and it was wet. He like turned really hard. His bike went one way and he would yell there. And we were all laughing. It was so much fun. But yeah, so Jackson was definitely a mess. You don't know where you can get at Jackson, but it was fun.
You know, we have a 2-story house. It's got a 90-degree staircase, and Jackson liked sitting at the top of it in a big Rubbermaid storage box and would slide down and just slam into the wall, and I'd get the, sorry, coach. And I think one of the last times he did is when he stuck his head around the corner and was like, love you, you know, and it was like, okay, that's very sarcastic, but I'll take it.
We'd hunt a lot. We had a place in like Childress where we'd hunt, and we'd go there. That was pretty much, we mostly just did like deer hunting, pig hunting, turkeys. Never really did any bird hunting or anything like that, but yeah, we'd always, we had like dirt bikes and 4-wheelers too that we'd ride around on, and that was really fun. He really enjoyed that. He'd be riding non-stop, and I'd have to tell him to stop because he'd just be wasting the gas, and I'm like, you gotta say something for me, what if I want to ride? But I remember the time that I broke my leg on my 4-wheeler. That was, I remember he went inside or something to our camp house that we had out there, and I was riding around and I was trying to do a stupid trick because I thought I was a like pro athlete or something, and I fell off and started rolling, and my leg got caught in a hole or on a branch or something, and it like turned weird and like broke my leg. Like I think my tibia snapped it clean in half. And I remember like I was right in front of the house, so I could like crawl back, but I was like screaming, crying, like, Jackson, Jackson, where are you? Get out here. And he comes out with his pants undone. He's like, I was taking a poop. I couldn't do anything. So he comes out, helps me up, gets me into a chair, and I was like, did you at least finish? He's like, no, I'm about to go do that right now.
Anytime when Bobby would play baseball, and he was a lot younger and really kind of too young to play at that point, or maybe just started playing, we were there a lot because me and their dad, we at Southwest Little League baseball field, we would help with get the fields ready for baseball games and help clean the bathrooms and concession stands and stuff like that. So we were up there a lot more than we were than just during baseball games. So he was always all over the place up there. You know, it's hard to keep up with him. He was the kind of kid that when we'd go to maybe out-of-town ball games for Bobby when he was on a travel team, it would be 15 minutes watching the game, and we'd look over, and Jackson would be running around with a group of little kids that I'd never even met before. He would just, you know, he'd act like they had been his friends his whole life. He just included everybody, you know, when he was playing baseball or at school or whatever. He just always wanted to include everybody in playing games and making them feel important.
At Roscoe Wilson, where he went to elementary school, each year they had what they call Western Day. This is a personal memory of mine because I think Renee was working, and I offered to go have lunch with him. And there's actually a picture of he and I that day at Western Day, but that was fun to go and sit and have lunch with him, and that was a great memory.
We were all, like, if we were at Graham's house, we would always travel in a group, you know. When, like, if there was ever a lot of people over, we would sit at, like, the kids' table. Just all four of us would sit at the same table. We'd travel together. We'd, you know, run around, trespass, apparently, together, all that, so.
But he loved his cousins, and when he spent the night at Graham's, he always wanted his cousins over there to spend the night with him. And I can remember when Bobby would go away to like maybe church camp or something, Jackson would miss him so much. I remember he'd always tell me, my heart hurts for Bobby, I wish he would come home. And then they'd fight in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, we'd always find a way to fight. If it wasn't in the first 5 minutes, then it was probably in the first minute, so. But yeah, we'd fight over just the dumbest stuff, like who's gonna ride this bike, who's gonna ride the skateboard, who gets this airsoft gun, who gets to play with that toy, whose turn it is on the Xbox or the PlayStation, whose turn it is on the computer, just stupid brother stuff like that. And I'd always pester him too, so I'd try to get him to fight me.
He was rambunctious. He was animated. Once he was going, he kept going. You know, when the kids would all play together, he was the one always wanting to, you know, keep going. We went on a hike one year up at Ruidoso, and and the kids were a lot younger. We had Jackson, Bobby, and Hayden, my son, and Kerrigan, my daughter, Renee, me, and my wife Tammy. So there's 7 of us, and I'm real paranoid out in the woods because it is nature. We don't tell nature what to do. Nature sort of tells us what to do. And Jackson, I mean, he'd run hundreds of yards ahead of everybody else. Well, you know, there are bears and there are other animals, and I mean, he was fearless. And he would run for a while, and then he would trip and fall. And the question he asks is, why do I keep on falling? Well, your feet are too fast for the rest of you right now. And the rest of your body will catch up with your feet as you continue to age. But I mean, he had no fear as far as, you know, getting out there and going and exploring and looking around and seeing everything. That was sort of the way he was. I mean, full bore all the time. No slowing down.
as I said, he was pretty hyper. So when if I'd go pick him up at his house, he'd be almost climbing the walls. But when he got in that car seat, it was like a calming effect for him. He just started looking out the windows and watching things. And that was one of the things that he did. He would look where he was going and always knew after he got a little bit older, he could tell you exactly where to go, because I guess he had sat for so many times, you know, and watched the streets of the businesses go by. And one time he went down to Frisco with us to see my stepdaughter, and he had been down one time before. And so when we were driving in Frisco and fixing to turn onto one of the streets to lead to their house, he said, "This is it, Graham. This is it, 4th Army Street," or whatever that was.
So this is just a lot of probably Jackson's favorite shirts that he always wore. A lot of them are baseball shirts. You can tell the number 51 is on there. Whenever Bobby was playing Little League, a coach would tell him that Ichiro is where 51 comes from, the baseball player Ichiro. So, and one coach told him he batted just like him. So he started wearing, that became his favorite baseball player. And he started wearing 51. And then of course Jackson wanted to wear it when he started playing baseball, is where that came, where the number 51 came from. But he loved like stuff like this, you know, just loved motorcycles, and like I said before, he loved wrestling. These are all the this right here, that's a baseball. Let's see. Oh, here is the one that has Ichiro on it in 51. And then, like I said, he loved wrestling. Let's see, just different things. When I look at them, I can remember him wearing them. Some of his school shirts. Here's a Roscoe Wilson elementary shirt. That was one of his favorite shirts that he liked to wear to church a lot. He has that on in a lot of the pictures. This reminds me of, I think he had this on his last birthday party, and wore red socks. So you can, he didn't really match that well ever. He had some weird clothes combinations.
We'd had a great day. We'd had our Thanksgiving meal at noon, and we'd had an awesome day with the family. The kids had gotten out in the yard and played because it was a nice day.
Lots of food, lots of talking, lots of laughing, just enjoying each other's company.
It was a nice day, and the kids were in the backyard playing. I think they like to play baseball out there. And
it was like any other typical Thanksgiving, just at Graham's. The whole family was there. Me and Jackson are probably pestering each other and getting on our parents' nerves, but
I don't really remember any specifics, just that it was a normal holiday, very, you know, fellowship and just enjoying each other's company.
Yeah, it was just pretty casual, you know. We knew that we were going to be leaving a couple days to go to our camp house, the land that we own by Childress.
The plan was that afternoon or that evening, Rebel, their dad, was going to come pick them up that evening. And so he came to my mom's house and picked them up, and we just got their shoes on and got them ready to go and took them out to the truck and put them in and buckled them up and kissed them goodbye, told them bye. And me and their dad were not married at this time. We were separated, so I was not going on the trip to the hunting lease.
It was just us three. It was, I think it was like afternoon sometime, because we stopped and picked something up to eat dinner on the way there. I think it was like Church's or something like that. But yeah, so we got there. Then after that, I remember my dad, it was kind of dark by then because it was in the fall. And after that, my dad went outside to his truck to make some calls. And he was just sitting in there, and me and my brother went into this room where we had a TV at and like a couch. And we didn't have a cable or anything, so we just had DVDs like Batman and cartoons, and my favorite was the He-Haw collection we had, and I'm pretty sure that's what we were watching whenever we got there. And I know we were doing that for about an hour, and we kind of got bored, so we started messing around in the rest of the house. We went into my dad's room, which he had like his bed, which was like a queen bed, and there were like 2 bunk beds kind of lining the walls at the end. One of them was just where me and Jackson slept, and another one was where his friends that he hunted with used to sleep before they left the camp house, and he used that just to store the guns on top now. And they were kind of like bunk beds with they were bigger on the bottom, so they kind of stuck out, and then on top it was just a single. So we just jumped from like bed to bed, just playing around, having fun.
A really dear friend that lives here that I grew up with, her sister was in town for Thanksgiving, so they wanted me to come over and just visit with them for a couple hours to see her. And so I did that, and then I went home probably about 9:30. I remember I stopped to fill my car up with gas, went home, got ready to go to bed because, again, I had to get up so early the next morning to go to work.
I remember we were jumping around, and I don't know why, but I jumped onto the bunk bed that had the guns on top, and Jackson was on the main bed, and my dad's he's good at gun safety, so I don't know why, but one of the shotguns was out, and I grabbed it on top to look at it, and I didn't check if it was loaded or if the safety was on. And I remember just turning within my head towards the other bunk bed, and then right when I turned, Jackson jumped right in front, and then that's when the gun went off. And I just remember him falling to the ground off the bunk bed, and I just dropped the gun and went down with him, and I tried to pick him up. I was saying, Jackson, get up, because I knew that he'd been hit, and he was trying to get up, but I couldn't get him up myself. And I remember just running towards the front of the house and out the door where my dad was parked. And I was calling to him, screaming, telling him to come in. Jackson's been shot. So he jumped out of the truck and came with me, followed behind it, back inside the house. And I remember we got about right through the front door and saw Jackson coming down the hall, holding his neck where he'd been shot. And I remember he got about halfway between us and where the room he was in, and then he collapsed again. And at that point, my dad ran over and picked him up off the ground to carry him. And he told me to go to the truck, get the door open for me so I can put Jackson in there. And I did, and I got in the passenger seat. He got in the driver's seat, and he laid Jackson across me this way, his head facing this way. And he was just laying on me. He handed me a towel to put pressure where the wound was. And I was just sitting there talking to him, trying to keep him awake. I remember I was just telling him that I loved him, and that I was sorry. And I just held him as he was just trying to catch his breath. He was just laying there moaning. He couldn't say anything to me. I was just holding pressure on it, just talking to him, trying to keep him awake, trying to keep him breathing. I remember my dad was just going as fast as he could to the children's hospital, and it felt like so long to get there, but I know he was moving had to be 120 miles an hour as fast as his truck could push. But the whole time I was just crying, just hoping that my brother would stay with me.
I was laying in bed, just kind of drifting off to sleep when my phone rang because I didn't get it before it cut off before I actually answered it. So I looked and I saw it was Rebel calling me, so I called him back. And this is probably about 10, maybe around 10 o'clock at night. And so I called him back, and he told me, he said, Jackson's been shot. And I said, what? And he said, Bobby accidentally shot Jackson. And I was like, oh my gosh. I said, he's going to be okay, right? Because I was thinking like a leg or an arm or something. And he says, no, I don't think he's going to make it. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And just this terrible, this cry I've never heard come out of my mouth before. It was just, I just couldn't believe what he was saying. And I said, well, what happened? And he said, Bobby accidentally shot Jackson, and it hit him in the neck. And I don't think he's going to make it. And only thing I can really remember is hanging up, trying to find, I called my mom and said, Jackson's been shot. Can you come get me so we can drive to Childress?
Bill and I went on to bed, and we were asleep. And Renee called and said, Mom, come get me. Jackson's been shot. And so I jumped up, of course, and got dressed as quick as possible, ran over, because she didn't live very far from me at that time. And went over and picked her up, and we took off. And I was driving very fast. And bless her heart, she was just practically screaming to God and praying that he would be okay. And it's 120 miles to Paducah, and then we had to go north from there another 30 miles, so it was about 150 miles that we had to drive to get there.
Kerrigan had gone to bed, and Hayden was sleeping, sleep over at a friend's house. Some guys had gotten together at Nick's house, and he spent the night over there. And Doug and I were going to bed. I had laid down but wasn't asleep yet, and my phone rang, and it was Renee, and she said, Jackson's been shot, and Graham and I we're going to Childress. And I said, I have to go with y'all. And she said, Tammy, we don't have time. We can't turn around and come back. We're like on the road to Childress. And she said, we need prayer. And by this time, Doug was awake because I was screaming. And I'm surprised it didn't wake Kerrigan up, because I didn't want her to wake up at that point. And Doug called who was not the pastor that's here now, but at the time, and he even called Graham and was talking to her as they were driving over there. And I just remember getting in the floor and praying as hard as I could.
And then we pull up to the hospital's, the emergency entrance, and I get out and I pull him out, and I'm trying to hold him up on my shoulder, but he's limp. And we walk in, and they grab him and put him onto a stretcher and take him into another room. And I'm just sitting there crying on the hospital floor. Because I knew he was God.
Probably 30, 45 minutes, an hour into the trip, my phone rings again, and I see it's Rebel, and so I answer it, but it's not him on the other line. It's actually the ER doctor. And he told me, he said, I just wanted to call and let you know that Jackson did not make it. And this whole time up to this point, I'm just in the passenger side. I'm crying, I'm praying, and knew in my gut that's what was going to happen, because Rebel had already told me he didn't think he was going to make it. So I kind of knew in my gut that was what the phone call was going to be. And at that point, it's kind of like something, just superpower took over me. I knew it was dark and my mom was driving, and she doesn't like driving at night. So I just said, pull over. And we switched places. And I was driving at this point, probably going about 120 miles an hour, just trying to get there, even though I knew Jackson was gone. My thought at that point was, I've got to get to Bobby.
I was just in shock. I couldn't talk or anything. The police came, tried to talk to me. I didn't want to talk or see anyone. I just felt so bad for what I'd done. And then I remember not long after they told us he was gone, my mom came in and went into the room at the hospital, and I remember seeing her just arched over Jackson, hugging him and just crying, and I couldn't bear to look too long, because I couldn't. I just couldn't believe I did that.
When we got to Children's, we rushed into they were in the emergency room, and they had Rebel in one room because I think might have had some heart. And normally, I mean, I could understand that. I think they had to check on him for some problems. And Bobby was in a little waiting room. And when we walked in, he grabbed his mom and he said, "Mom, I'm so sorry." And that was what he said to every family member every time the first time he saw him, he would say, "I am so sorry. I'm just so sorry."
I think my mom walked in there with me. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure she did. But just in this big emergency room, I walked in, and there's my baby just laying there on the stretcher. He had a tube sticking out of his mouth because they had intubated him to try to help him breathe. And he had just a gauze right there on his neck, but other than that, he just looked perfect. And of course, as a mother, I wanted to check him out all over, so I was pulling up the sheet, looking at everything, and I just pulled that little bandage away from his neck, and there was a hole right there. And just hugged him and didn't want to let him go. And at this point, my mom was in there with me. And we just wanted to hold him and look at him as long as we could. And Bobby ended up coming in there with us as well. And he, of course, hugged him. And I think that probably went on for a good 2 hours, just wanting to be in there with him.
I knew I'd messed up, and I know it's easy to forgive others, but it's hardest to forgive yourself, And it's still hard sometimes to forgive myself for what I did, but over time I learned to do that.
And I stood there right by him until we got ready to leave. And it was really hard to leave.
I wanted Bobby to ride with me, but he wanted to ride with his dad. So I'm like, okay, I'll meet you back in Lubbock, but I'm going to come pick you up tonight because I want you to stay with me. And so we got back, and I went and got him at Rebel's house, and we got back to probably the house, and I would say it's about this time, it was about 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. Extremely long night. And my sister, wanted to come over and be with us, and we just all sat there in the living room on the couch, just wondered how we were going to make it. And I just didn't want to let Bobby out of my sight at that point. I didn't know how he was going to live with this.
That started our road that we've been on for the last 8 years. We were all there at Renee's house Friends flooded their home. Bobby's friends just surrounded him, and I know that's what's gotten him through this.
There was just people there all the time. A lot of people coming and bringing things and just showing us a lot of love. All his friends came over to be with me.
People were bringing food, and I had gone back home to my house and probably cleaned up before I went back over to Renee's the next day. And we just, were over there, and then with her and Bobby. And I remember at one point, Bobby was laying down on her bed, and Renee says, "Mom, don't you want to lay down for a while?" So I laid down with Bobby, and we held hands.
Well, the first couple of days were the hardest because all I wanted to do was just sleep and just not do anything, And then like a week went by and I could finally get out, and my mom would try to get me to talk to her about it more, and I didn't really want to talk. I just wanted to kind of keep my emotions bottled up. But then several weeks to a month went by, and I figured that bottling up your emotions isn't really the best thing to do, so I started to talk more to her and to my family. And
it was tough. It was a blur. And, but you just, even though I know Renee would say this, just didn't want to get out of bed some days. And we all have no idea what all she really went through as a mom. But I just hurt for her and Bobby so much.
Our pastor actually did the service. Bill Couch was our pastor at the time. And he did the service, and then Doug assisted him. Doug read the obituary and had a few words to say. And Doug was our rock. He arranged, and kept everybody informed about what was going on and when and where, because the funeral home is named Lake Ridge as well as our church is named Lake Ridge, but they're in two different places. So it was confusing to especially people out of town, family that lived out of town.
About a year into it, I remember waking up one morning going, okay, I'm tired of being depressed. I'm tired of being sad. So probably somewhere between 6 months and a year, I thought I need to do something to get my life back on track and, try to deal with this is a healthier way than, drinking a bottle of wine every night. And so, it started getting a little easier, and there was in about a year there was days that actually I didn't cry, so I felt like I was dealing with it a little easier at that point. And then it was like a wave would hit me again, it just come out of the middle of nowhere. It was crazy how just things would trigger it, So, but I felt like it was real important at that time to start, working out, eating healthier. I just felt like I needed to do a whole lot of things to come together so I could start, dealing with it more in a healthy way.
It was just real hard for me to accept. At first it took me a long time to, even though I knew it and I trusted God to be by our side and His strength pouring over us. But it was still really hard, and sometimes to this very day, I just have a very hard time. I still want to know why, and I know I'm not going to ever know until it probably won't matter anymore.
Went back to school after a couple weeks. I figured that, no matter what happens, life doesn't wait for you. You can either stay and get left behind or pick yourself back up and keep going. So I did exactly that. Tried to keep going with life, but it was hard for a while. And then after about a year, it just got a little bit easier, you know. Still had some rough nights, some rough days, but I knew that if I just kept going, there'd be better days and that I could recover from this.
And of course I had Bobby, so I probably made myself deal with it and not really wanted to show him my deepest, darkest times because he was having his and I needed to be strong for him. I do remember one time I was leaving for work one morning and I started my car and the garage door didn't go all the way up. So I hit the garage door button again, and instead of going up, it came back down. And I remember for just a little bit sitting there thinking, I could sit down right now in this garage with my car running and just end it. You know, I was at that point at one time that I just didn't want to go on. Of course, I wouldn't have ever done that to my family. Especially not Bobby. That's the last thing they needed, is to lose somebody else. But I think it's so important always to tell people that you may feel that way, but that's not what you want to do. Well, it was really kind of surreal, you know, just could not believe something like this was happening to me. You literally feel your heart hurting, you know, literally it hurts. You feel a pain right there in your heart. I just, probably my main concern after all this happened is how was I going to help Bobby survive this? He was really my main concern after the accident.
Yeah, I think of this quote of, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. And I like that a lot. Whenever I start feeling down, I always think about those good times I had with him, all the baseball trips we'd take together, all the fun times on the roof, all the fun games we'd play. But
you know, God definitely is the first and foremost way I got through. That I would, him, if it wasn't for him, I don't think I would be here today. And just, you know, a good family to support you and love you, and that's what we had. Good parents, their friends' parents all loved us and supported us, and all the teachers, both my boys' teachers, both of their schools were amazing. The things that they did for us, and you know, there was a lot of, Bobby missed quite a bit of school after that, so he had some teachers that, you know, would help him make things up, you know, that way, so he wouldn't get so far behind. But you just really see a lot of angels step out whenever you go through something like this, and that's something that I always just want to pay it forward, you know.
So for about 4 or 5 years, I can't remember how long, our family, we would go to the chapel at Lake Ridge Methodist Church and take some candles, and we would all, Doug always led this, like he would kind of let us know what to do. This year, let's just bring memories and talk about them. Or this year, let's bring a scripture that's helped you through this. And we would sit around and share.
It was a way to remember Jackson, to not be afraid to say his name, to say his name, and to remember the 10 years we had with him. And you know, I ask people sometimes, you know, bring a picture of you with Jackson that is a special memory, or bring something that belonged to Jackson that you have, that you can you know, tell us about and why that's meaningful to you. And we would pray together, we'd read some Psalms together, and just sort of spend some time in really a holy moment together of reflection and reconciliation and healing. And I the first couple of those were really, really hard for us. 2 or 3 boxes of Kleenexes. I mean, just it tear festival, and not terrible tears, but tears of remembering what was, what could be, and reflecting on that memory, and it was painful. And you never fully heal, I don't think, but you can make some progress from where you were. And over the course of 8-9 years now, we've made some progress.
The mornings were definitely the hardest. Waking up, you'd wake up, and for a while there, you would think you were just having a bad dream. That probably happened for several weeks or months. I did that. My dad had passed away when I was 19, and I did not handle that situation very well at all. I was 19, I was just starting college. I just kind of did my own thing. I didn't even lean on God. I lived in Dallas at the time. I just did a lot of unhealthy things to get through that, and that's all temporary. It doesn't help you get through it to drink and party and do things like that. That's just temporary numbing is what that is. So it's kind of strange that kind of prepared me for losing my son, because I knew I needed to do that differently. And probably I just seek God a lot harder than I ever have before.
As devastating as it was losing my husband, losing a grandson at 10 years old was the hardest thing I've ever been through. It was just so devastating. It just took, and it still hurts. I know that, and I have to admit, I lost a little bit of faith at that time. Even though in my heart, I knew that I trusted Jesus, and I knew that he was going to be with us, and I knew he didn't cause this, but I still asked why. Why would you take my 10-year-old grandson? So yeah, it was very difficult.
I would suggest that you have a friend or family member that you really trusted to just, talk with them about your feelings, what you're feeling and what you're going through. Therapist, definitely somebody professional is always a good thing, just because they're not your family and you don't really know them that well. Bobby and I both went to see therapists, separate therapists. It took him 2 or 3 to see before he found the one he could really talk to, and that's something important too. If you don't feel that connection with them, try somebody else. I think they understand that.
It was tough afterwards, for sure. I think I missed about 2 weeks of school or something like that, but I remember after, I just didn't want to really go outside or anything. I just wanted to stay in my room, in my bed. People would come over and I didn't really want to talk to anyone. Yeah, my way of grieving was, I know my mom was always worried about me whenever I was grieving, because I like to kind of be into myself. I have a real mathematical mind, so I like to just think to myself, think things through, figure it out on my own. But I kind of figured out that that's not really the best way. You got to talk about it. You got to talk about this stuff with somebody. I remember going to therapy with a couple therapists. I really didn't like it that much at first, but I found this guy that I liked a lot. He was just really straightforward with me, kind of treated me just like a normal person. Some of these therapists try to do weird stuff with you to try to get you out of your shell, and I didn't like that, or try to treat you just like another project or something instead of just like a regular person. But I went to him for a while. I still didn't really like therapy, but I felt like that helped a lot. I think talking with my family and friends was more helpful to me during that. And then once I went back to school, that kind of helped, because I kind of take my mind off of things. And also baseball helped a lot, because I was just constantly doing that. So yeah, it was really tough at first, but
kind of a tradition with our family and with Renee and everybody. On his birthday every year we do a balloon release. We do ours at our house. I don't think we've done one yet where the wind didn't pick up suddenly and blow the balloon straight into a tree. So every year we kind of laugh. We're like, that's Jackson. Because he would not be happy if we wrote 4 balloons. We write notes on it. So it's always funny, a month later, you can still read each other's notes hanging up in the tree. And I will go to my grave swearing that that's Jackson having a hand in it.
Definitely hold the ones that are still here with you and the family. Family's really important. You only get one of them. So definitely hold them tight and don't dread the tragedy and almost just remember the great moments. That's what you have to live with. And know that you'll see them again one day and that they'll always be with you. And just remember the great moments that no one can take away from you. And hug the ones that are close with you and tell me you love them every day because you don't know what could happen.
We're the typical father-son. We have our battles, but we also can talk. And we've talked a lot about Jackson over the years. Shed a lot of tears, but a lot more laughs. And so I think it's crucial to be able to open up. And we're men. We're not supposed to cry. But I've tried to teach my son it is okay. That to me, the stronger, bigger man is the one that can cry and show emotions. Life's hard enough that we can't do it alone. We can't keep it departmentalized inside. I know I could do a better job, but I also know we've had a lot of good talks and prayers together. And I think we've all worked really hard finding those special memories and keeping them alive. And just stay on the path, keep focused on the good. Life's hard enough as it is, and then you throw in something like this, it can destroy a lot of people. It did a good number on our family, but today I feel like we're stronger for it in countless areas.
Tell us when. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday, Jackson!
I usually cook hamburgers and brownies. And then I go buy balloons. And whatever age he is at that year, that's how many balloons I get. And we eat and tell Jackson stories, and then we go out and release the balloons. And that's always a special time. We've done that every year. So it's getting up to a lot of balloons now. In fact, he would have just turned 18, so we had 18 balloons last summer. I kind of thought we might stop doing it at 18, and Renee said, I don't know, this worked so good, let's just keep doing it. I think everybody likes it. It's healing. I think it's very healing. In the first year when we were going to do it, I asked Bobby, I said, what color balloons do you want me to get? He said blue. I said, okay. So that's what we did.
I probably still haven't fully processed everything from the accident. Just going through that and then into the latter half of high school and, into college. Like there was a lot to process. Like even still, I'll get emotional just thinking about it and try and sit down and look in my heart and see what these things are and really just bring them to the forefront and intentionally make myself look at these things and ask questions, and which is probably some of the most difficult work that you can do is the emotional work, the work of the heart.
That's good.
So
I am studying psychology right now, so I'm getting a master's in counseling, and I would say that there is such power in vulnerability. And I remember right after Jackson, the accident happened, being filled with a lot of fear. Fear of guns, fear of really anything, but especially fear that something would happen to Hayden. And I remember, I would go and sleep on his floor at night just because I just needed to be close to him. It's like we all experienced loss, but Hayden understood because Jackson was our cousin. We both knew what that relationship was like. And so I would say that there is such power in being real and transparent.
What I knew ahead of time, but was really reinforced for me is, you know, our family has the strongest women in it. Renee is so strong. My wife is so strong. My daughter, my mother-in-law. Over on my side of the family, my mom, and I have 4 sisters. I mean, these are strong. You don't want to mess with these women. They are strong women. And so just to be a part of that, a small part of that, as, you know, as everything rolled along was, I mean, it was, you know, say it was a gift is wrong, but it was a real blessing in a lot of ways to go through that and to be walking with her in all those moments.
I remarried a couple of years ago. A mutual friend that knew he and I both introduced us. We get along great. We travel. We tell people we bought a pool with a house instead of a house with a pool. So we enjoy that. We enjoy the same things. Bobby's doing great. He is a senior in college. He'll be graduating in May. Been so proud of him. He was salutatorian of his high school class, and now he's done really good through college, and he'll be a computer engineer when he graduates in May, and already has a job in Katy. So proud of him for that. Life is good. Life is good. We still miss Jackson every day. It still hurts. We still cry. We talk about him all the time, me and my family. We have get-togethers. We're always sitting around talking about him.
Right away, we did not close up about it. We all talked about it and said his name as much as possible. And I think that's important. I've heard people say that maybe a little older than me, whenever bad things happen, you just didn't talk about it. You didn't mention their name. When people saw you, they didn't bring them up. And I get it. I've done that before. But now that we've lost Jackson, if I see someone who has lost a family member, I'll ask them about them, because they want people to, they know they haven't been forgotten. And so almost every time we're together, he's in the subject. He's in the conversation, memories and funny things, and we keep his memory alive that way.
It warms my heart when people, I love when because the more years that pass by, we don't see a lot of new pictures of him or hear a lot of new stories.
Yeah.
And so when we're sitting around the dining room table and somebody will say something to Aunt Nay that makes her remember a story, and then we all get to enjoy it and listen to it. And so I think the best thing you can do is bring it up, because it's always on, especially right after. It's the only thing we're thinking about. And so it's not like, if I bring it up, it'll make you sad. Well, we're already sad. And so just bring it up and we can laugh together and we can cry together.
Yeah. I feel like afterwards, I didn't know that I was consciously doing this, but it felt like I was looking for opportunities to talk to somebody about it.
Yes.
Or somebody to just bring it up, ask me how I was doing, so that I could speak about it. Because really, I mean, his life, I know we talked about, like, there's not a lot of stories, and it was just 10 years of a life to live. But in those 10 years, I mean, it was like full, like he lived it to the fullest. And so there's probably more stories that we've forgotten.
Yes, yeah. Like his mom says, he lived a life bigger as a 10-year-old than many people do that are 50 or 60.
The first week's definitely the hardest. I mean, it feels like there's just a horrible pain in your heart and in your soul, and it's really tough because you just wake up every morning like wanting it to go away, but it's just gonna always be there. There's always gonna be that hole. And yeah, after that it it never goes away, but it gets easier. Like after the first month, it was still tough, but I could get out with friends more, be around family a lot more, and then a couple more months after that, it was a little bit better. Just gradually just gets better, just like building a Lego set or something. You gotta do it piece by piece, put all the pieces back together. And I guess after a year, it was still tough, but it wasn't as bad. Whenever that day comes around, whenever he passed away, it's always the hardest, you know, and that'll never change. But I like to always just think of the good times we had together instead of just trying to think of the bad times, you know. That seems to help a lot.
Encourage friends and family to talk about your loved one, because I know I was at church one day and a friend said how sorry she was about Jackson, and of course I started crying. She said, "I'm so sorry that I made you cry." And I said, "You didn't make me cry." I said, I cry all the time about it because that was so soon afterwards, you know. And but it probably took me several years to get to the point that I could talk about him without crying. Probably, I'd say 2-3 years before I could actually talk to somebody about him without crying. And the main thing I think that helps is knowing God, knowing that He's in your life, and knowing that the only way you can get through it is with His help and His support and His strength. Because you can't do it on your own. There's no way.
I have a lot of friends now, mom friends, that lost their children. I think it's really important that we help each other through it. It's like I was, saying earlier, that there's not near enough things out in the world to help parents get through the loss of children. I think it's hard to talk about. It makes people feel really uncomfortable. It's just so painful, that no one wants to talk about it. I've been in some groups with some moms that probably have lost their children a lot longer ago than I did, and they didn't even have what I had as far as people to step out and help you.